There are 5 main types of money personalities. Identifying your money personality can provide some fascinating insight into how you view and how you handle your finances. In its cover story, Finweek looks at various money personalities while trying to identify easy hacks that could help you master your finances. Our guests for this section are Thayn, Niemand, he's a certified financial planner, and Lynette, Wilkinson, senior certified financial advisor at Chartered Wealth. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today. Perhaps let me start off with you, Thayn, and say, what is a money personality? I mean, oftentimes one does these tests about how to find a perfect match romantically and all those kind of things. Is it something similar along those lines?
The super money personalities, there's 5 basic types. But the big question for me is, how do you know what type you are? You know, so there's a variety of tests that have been devised to test which type of money personality you are. But from a financial planning perspective, I've got a little bit of a different view on that, and that revolves around risk profiling.
How do we get to understand what our money personality is?
I think it's very important first to understand the person. You can't advise someone about, should I put my money into A, B, or C or D fund? It's important to understand how they think, what their thoughts are on money, what their history is with money, what their objectives are going forward, because that'll give you a sense of the person's money personality.
Lynette, but is there a test, like a psychometric equivalent or of that nature, that gets you to one of the 5?
There is, but like all psychometric tests, I think you've got to not put yourself in one box and agree that it's a guideline only and gives you an indication. But you've still got to take the whole person into context.
What worries me about the idea of a money personality is that very often you excuse your bad behavior because it's very easy to say, well, you know, I am a risk taker, so I'm not going to change my bad financial habits because this is my money personality. How do you address that sort of thing?
If I can suggest that, you know, to try and identify your financial personality is a difficult thing. So any one of my clients might have all 5 personalities in them. You know, it will just depend on how much red wine he had last night, or whether it's the middle of the month, or whether it's the day after payday. So what we suggest we do is that financial planners stick to financial planning, and that is to identify the risk required in the client relationship, identify the risk tolerance and the risk capacity. Now, the risk tolerance is a psychometric test, and we like to use the Institute of Behavioral Finance, where you do the psychometric test and they tell you whether you're conservatively inclined or aggressive, and then you take that calculation or that estimation and you bring it together in your whole financial plan, and it's based on a relationship between the 3 aspects. It's not just one personality question.
And
Go for it.
Lynette, how would you advise someone who's identified that they have a negative money personality to go about changing that bad financial behavior?
I think you have to give advice in the context of the person and their circumstances. So there's mathematically, what would it be better to put money into my bond or into an investment? And then there's, what is the personality going to do? So you have to be aware of, if you say to the person, put the money in your bond, are they then going to access it to buy a new car or to go on holiday or whatever? So being aware of the personality is good, and I think it's education. It's learning and learning and learning, and it's making them aware of the consequences of their behavior, showing them. If you do that, what are the long-term consequences? So it's education.
Sure. Now, a financial planning process obviously includes me as the client, it includes you as the financial planner, it includes the plan, it includes my circumstances. So how do you balance the personalities that I have when it comes to money and your own personalities that you have when it comes to money, as well as my financial circumstances that I'm currently in? So example is, I'm a spender. I get a thrill when I spend. I like spending. I like buying shoes, cabs, clothes, like going on fantastic getaways, etc., etc. But my financial situation requires me to be a saver because I'm getting married soon, or I'm paying lobola soon, or I'm going to university. And you're, on the other hand, you are someone who believes in avoiding certain things, in avoiding getting into investments, in avoiding getting into complicated financial instruments, etc., etc. How do we sit together and how do we balance all those things so that at the end of the day, as a client, I become the winner?
I like what Lynette said in the beginning. It's actually a mathematical calculation. So you sit down with your financial planner and you decide what your financial goals and dreams are. The financial planner uses this financial fancy calculator called software, and we calculate for you what is the amount of money that you need, what rate of return you require on that money, and what you have. Once you've calculated the numbers, now we can go and have a look at what is your ability and what is your tolerance to risk. But the big thing revolves around drafting up a financial plan that's agreed with your financial planner. So, and in that financial plan, you will have review dates. You will have dates where you assess what has happened in the past, what's happening in the future. So it really revolves around this relationship. It's like you going to the same doctor for many years. Eventually the doctor gets to know your faults, gets to know where your weaknesses and your strengths are. So it's the same thing, but it revolves to me around a relationship.
Cool. Now, so if people are, inherently spenders, and the financial plan says you need to be a saver, can people change?
I think they can. It's about discipline. So why don't you sign a debit order into an investment that cannot be accessed? So I had a client many years ago who was like that, spendings. So he signed a debit order into an investment called a retirement annuity. He couldn't access it until he's 55. So that money was locked away from that client.
Maybe let me interject. I mean, we only have 5 personalities, and maybe there might be merit in then just going through some of them, and also how, if you are within one of these, how do you maximize your wealth creation journey or your investment strategy, assuming that you have one. So let me start with you, Lynette. I mean, let's look at the savers. Typically, what characteristics do these people display?
They're very frugal, often too frugal in terms of enjoying life. Especially in retirement, you find people who have been savers their whole life are then terrified to go on a holiday, to enjoy their savings, enjoy what they've accumulated at the detriment of their lifestyle and their enjoyment. So for me as a financial planner, to advise a person who has been a saver their whole life, it's amazing, they've amassed this money. Now you've got to help them dream and help them see that they can now utilize this money to their best advantage, without putting themselves at risk. And I think that's where we can help. As long as we can show them that they won't be at risk by living the life they'd like to live, they'll be fine.
So you see, to all the gentlemen who are probably watching today, saving isn't always the answer. A little bit of spending is encouraged. Perhaps then, let's come to the next one, the risk takers. Typically, how do you know that now you are definitely a risk taker?
Well, I'll ask him which horse won the Durban July last week.
And they know it by name.
So the risk taker is typically not having a lot of money in his account because he's always trying to use it. Not necessarily buying shoes, but maybe buying shares or starting a business. A risk taker is somebody that is actually quite flippant about money, and you will treat it as a vehicle rather than an element of savings, And you get obviously the high risk taker and the low risk taker, and very often we have clients that we call recklessly cautious. So they are so averse to risk that they don't want to save money in anything other than money market instruments over 10 years. So your risk taker is not that kind of person.
Not that kind of person. Security seeker. I mean, for me, this sounded like somebody who has some sort of psychological problem in addition to having issues with money. But what would a security seeker, what would their relationship with money be like?
I think their relationship is probably one of insecurity with money, which is why they seek security through money. So they'll be more cautious. They'll want to make sure everything's paid. They'll never take any risks. They won't spend their bonus before they've got it, which in many ways is a good thing. It's just a matter of helping them create that balance and helping them to get to the point where they feel secure. Because whether you have 10 Rand or 10 million Rand, there are people who have 10 million Rand who feel insecure, and people who have 10 Rand who feel that's completely fine.
Thayn, you laugh, but are you a security seeker when it comes to money?
Strangely not, but I have a very good client that is, and what Lynette's saying is absolutely down to the wire. He has money in his account, but he's too scared to actually take a 10% risk. So his security blanket is the fact that he looks in his bank account and he sees that he's got this amount of money. Whether it's keeping track with the inflation and the buying power of inflation is irrelevant to him. He just sees the money sitting in his account.
May I ask, how financially self-aware are clients by the time they come to you? Are they aware of these things in themselves? Because it's quite difficult to self-identify your financial bad behavior.
I don't know how you feel in it, but my experience is that clients are not aware of don't know how to assess their financial personality. So it's up to, and that's why the psychometric test of the Institute is, for me, so useful, because you'll find a client will classify himself as being conservative, but you ask him what rate of return he expects, and he'll give you a rate of return that is aggressive. So absolutely, the client has their own vision of what they are, but whether that is the reality, it's not
and I guess
always
Thandi's
true.
comment then becomes even so much more important, whether it's possible to break those barriers if you want something else but you're stuck in a particular classified folder, if I may call it that. Let's move on to the fourth, the spenders. I mean, I'm sure I can identify with these, and I have one sitting right here next to me. But Lynette, the spenders, how do we pick these guys out in a crowd?
They've always got the best of the latest of everything.
Okay, no, he
Stylish.
doesn't put the category anymore.
But I think with spenders, you've got to make their end objective more exciting than the current need to go away for the weekend or the latest boots or whatever. If their end objective is exciting and you keep them excited in what it is they're saving towards, that must stay top of mind. Then it becomes worth it for them.
Well, I've had just a very interesting comment in my ear, and perhaps then you can take this on behalf of our director. He says, well, he likes spending on debt. How does that work? Which grouping would that fall under?
I think that would be under the serious spender personality, the extreme spender. No, I think debt is obviously something we as financial planners, we try to encourage our clients not to incur too much debt. I don't believe that you should be financially stretched, if you can tell the director, but maybe financially strained is not so bad.
Yeah.
So if, Lynette, to your comment of, keeping a spender motivated to, for the end goal, how is there something that a spender, if I know that I'm a spender, is there something that I can do to motivate myself in that way? What tools do you use to motivate people?
It's individual, because it depends what's important to you. Is that skiing trip top of your list, or is it top of your list to have X amount in an account or whatever? And for spenders, normally it's not X amount in the account, it's a thing. And even if the thing is security to know I can stop working at X age or whatever. So it's to put that goal and then to measure it and say, look, you're getting closer. There's nothing as fantastic as someone 5 years ago couldn't retire, now you're going, look, how awesome is this? You're now completely fine and you can retire. But you've got to keep that top of mind for them.
And go ahead, Thayn.
Sometimes the visual thing can work, So if you say to a spender, listen, if you carry on spending, Thayn, at this rate, when you retire, you're going to retire in a 2-bedroom apartment. But if you just spend a little bit less and invest a little bit more, you could retire in a 3-bedroom apartment. And perhaps visually, I know that works for me, visually you can encourage a spender to spend less and save more.
And then, of course, the final one, the avoider. Again, this sounds very, very problematic. I keep linking it to sort of psychological, relationship-y kind of stuff. Maybe it's Valentine's Day, maybe that's what's going wrong in my head. But then, the avoiders, what kind of people? I can't imagine someone running away from money, so it's got to be something else.
It's easy to identify a avoider, I believe, Nusipho. That is the person that has got all these envelopes on their desk from the various clothing companies, the various credit card companies and the banks, but they're all unopened. So they're actually trying to avoid this situation. They don't want to see the financial planners because they're too scared to actually hear what their real situation is. So an avoider will very seldom talk about money, or rather divert the topic to something else rather than money.
Even in relationships, if we're seeing a person for financial planning, we'd prefer to have both spouses present. And very often one spouse doesn't want to participate because they don't actually want to know.
And what happens then when you're sitting with two very different personalities? For example, you have an avoider and a spender, and clearly for me it would seem that that's a relationship that's headed for doom. Do you have any right to say, guys, maybe we need to rethink why you guys are even together?
No, we definitely wouldn't go there. But it certainly is an education thing.
Yeah.
It's making them aware and spending the time to educate and teach them of the consequences of the different behaviors. Because I think the behavior can be modified if you understand the consequence.
That's you know, Nosipa, in the older generation, you find that very often, if it's a husband and wife situation, when you're talking to the husband about financial issues, the wife will go and make tea and go and get cake. And it's actually, I don't know if you find it, but sometimes you got to say, sorry, ma'am, would you mind sitting down and joining us with? So it is an education thing. We find that to educate, it's good to educate both spouses or both partners.
And they must be on the same page. They need to participate jointly if it's their joint financial plan.
They've got to be reading the same book.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, because today is Valentine's Day. And we've got spenders that are likely going to splash out,
Yes.
unlike me. And we've got avoiders, we've got security seekers, we've got savers. Are these guys unlikely to spend on days like this? Because, you know, largely there are also social circumstances and social impacts. For example, if you're a saver, you may tend to become very isolated from your friends who go out every weekend partying, who are likely to go out tonight and celebrate Valentine's Day somewhere in some ball somewhere. And this guy is always keeping his money, putting it into shares, and not very popular because he doesn't spend.
And rice at home.
Yeah, he doesn't buy the wine. You know, will he buy the cards at least or flowers today?
Depends how long we've had him. If we've been able to educate him, he'll do it. Because the end just definitely justifies the means today.
So I tweeted this morning and I said, if you're spending money on Valentine's gift, be aware of your budget and also understand, by not buying a gift, is the risk worth the return?
Exactly. Exactly.
I think that's a definite smart way of looking at it. I mean, I was quite intrigued looking at the cover of this week's Finweek, and it has Simpiwe Shabalala, who happens to be, you know, a very big soccer player in South Africa, and if my memory serves me correctly, scored the first World Cup goal, right? And we always think about soccer players and how, you know, they would definitely fall under spenders for me when it comes to how they manage their money. And here's this gentleman talking about how he is actually very frugal and how he's really about investing. I mean, you spoke to him, Tanya. Did that come as a surprise to you at all?
It certainly did. Like you said, you know, in football, these guys get paid enormous amounts of money, and they buy beautiful cars. They have many girlfriends, some of them, and they don't tend to spend a lot of money. I mean, we've got cases of, or we've had cases of soccer players who've passed on and there was nothing to bury them with. And it has sort of become a characteristics of the soccer fraternity. So when I spoke to him and I asked him, so out of these 5, where would you classify yourself? And he said, I'm a definite security seeker. And I said, but you know, what motivated you to get to that level? And he said, well, you know, he likes to manage his own money. He's had people in the past that he has trusted, whose opinion he trusted, and they lured him into certain investments and getting into certain businesses. And he says, I actually got my fingers bent, and from there I decided, I'm going to play my game my own way. He does make use of a financial advisor every now and then, or an investment advisor for his investment. But what was also striking for me was when I asked him because if you look over the past 10, 15 years, there's been educational programs from football, from sports, from schools everywhere to say, actually start saving, because at the end of the day, in the long run, you will be left with nothing. And he says that has actually paid off now within the soccer fraternity, because you can see amongst his peers, a lot of the guys are actually not, you know, giving too much when it comes to buying the big black Aston Martins. They're actually now buying properties and investing in properties. He's saying, no, you can almost get a sense that there's an unidentified or unsaid type of competition as to who owns a property where and how much is it worth. And I think that competition is healthy.
That's better. So it's education. It's changed the situation around.
I think that speaks to an interesting point. What influence does your peer group have on your money personality? Do you find that you meet people who live a certain lifestyle because their friends live that lifestyle, and does that have an effect on the financial decisions they make?
I think, Christia, it depends on the personality concerned. We have clients that are very much under peer pressure, and it depends on the age group. So to answer the question in a nutshell, I would say very definitely you are under peer pressure, and that's where I like Mark's comment when he said you need a trusted financial advisor. So if you've got a financial advisor that can say to you, listen, the peer pressure is telling you to spend 100 Rand but your financial advisor is saying save 20 Rand, that relationship will actually eventually boost you above that peer pressure.
I mean, what's certain is that irrespective of which grouping you fall under, everybody's under pressure with the interest rates, like everything is more expensive. And I thought it was very clever of Finweek, even though I don't like giving them compliments all the time, that they had a very interesting piece right next to this one, talking about, you know, a few ways in which you can make 2014 a better year in the sense of just being a bit more frugal. And one of the things that stuck out was, well, how about you revisit your bank statements and how much you're actually being charged? I mean, from where you sit, without, you know, going through everything that was in the article, I mean, Lynette, what would you think for 2014? One should quick wins that are not drastic. Doesn't mean that you have to sit down with a financial manager, but that you can do for yourself to make sure that irrespective of which grouping you're in, but you're actually having a better return on your overall spend.
I think firstly, know what you're spending your money on. I think most people don't know how much money they're spending on lunches, cappuccinos, glasses of wine with friends, etc. Yes. If you know where your money's going, then you can make an assessment as to where should I be better deploying these funds, or do I want to? Maybe you want to have the cappuccino every day. Maybe you want to buy lunch, but understand the consequences. I think firstly, know where your money's going.
Your final comment then on that one?
I think budget, revisit your insurance portfolio, and look how much money is being hidden in the costs of your investments, because those are the long-term issues.